Welcome to the Helping Conversation, an exploration and celebration of the practice, art, and science of facilitating trusting, safe, inclusive, and effective helping conversations with others.
Recorded at RockVox Recording and Production Podcast Studios in Rochester, New York. Mouth off at RockVox. RockVox.com. Having enjoyed a 40-year career facilitating his own authentic brand of the helping conversation, your host, executive and recovery coach, Keith Greer.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much once again for sitting in with us on this episode of the Helping Conversation. If I were to ask you how you would define the difference between a manager and a leader, think for a moment of what your answer would be, or what your experience has been maybe in your workplace, or how you think about your role if you are in any kind of management or leadership role within your professional life. I think these are two terms that often we combine or we use them to describe the same thing, and we don't realize that there's a pretty significant difference in how these two folks operate. I want to just share an article I found in the Careers magazine. It's called "What is the Difference Between Management and Leadership?" And it's from October of 2018. And the author talks about how often a manager is used to describe a leader, and they are two distinct skill sets, and the difficulty she has when people engage her in this conversation. And so I'm quoting from the article. "I cringe inside because the more I read, the more I realize that this was not just semantics and a difference on word choice. No, it was an outright mindset that really pushed forward the theory that we, people, could ever actually manage other people and do it effectively. That mindset is a problem for me since most people cannot even effectively manage themselves, their own lives, their families, etc." I love that. Just love that. That is such a great statement. How can one possibly be expected to manage another person or a group of people? Add to this that today's employees are expected to, at least in theory, actually make great contributions to their organizations and make their supervisors look good. The more I read, the more I realized how far we still have to go with distinguishing between these two competencies. Leadership and management are both necessary competencies that add institutional value. Neither is superior or inferior to the other. They are just different. We manage things such as programs, budgets, contracts, projects, and processes, but we should be leading people. The idea of managing people, quotes around that, just sounds demeaning in the 21st century. Many of us wear both hats, but we need to understand the difference so that we can appropriately flex within and between the two roles. And the article goes on to describe some of the differences between leadership and management. And I just thought that was maybe a wonderful intro for our discussion today with our guest. So let me jump in and introduce you to the person we're going to spend the next 60 minutes with, who is an expert in this area and has been doing this work in the world of management and leadership for a really long time. Ron Reich has 28 years of training and development experience. His background is broad-based, having worked for some major organizations such as Toshiba, the Chubb Corporation, and Organon Pharmaceuticals. Ron started his own consulting firm in 2006 and has worked in many industries, including medical and assisted living facilities, manufacturing, high-tech, retail, pharmaceuticals, and banking. He is also a well-respected and sought-after faculty member of the American Management Association. The majority of work through the years has focused on leadership and management development, corporate training, organizational development, as well as coaching at all levels through client companies. An avid reader, Ron has read over 300 leadership, management, and relationship-oriented books over the past 18 years. Ron's philosophy centers on participant-based training and experiential learning. He believes it is his job to pull information from the clients that they already know. Another aspect of Ron's philosophy is the necessity to reinforce any training or coaching upon being completed. Ron is passionate about his work and makes his sessions as interactive and fun as possible. one of his only requests for clients is to arrive ready to participate and have some fun along the way. Please join me in welcoming into the Helping Conversation, Ron Reich. Good morning, Ron.
Good morning, Keith. Good to be here.
Glad to have you. Such an important conversation, and as was highlighted in that article, such an important differentiation in our world of what these two positions do and what the skill sets are. And we will definitely get into all of this. So let's jump in and get started and just have you fill us in a little bit above and beyond the short intro I did, a little bit of your journey that has you doing what you do today.
Well, Keith, it's funny because I began my career so many years ago in human resources. I was working for a very small HR consulting firm, and we closed the doors for a number of different reasons. And, I always had the inkling, I would love to get into training and development. I would just love to do that. And in my personal life was falling apart at the time, frankly. I mean, I was going through a divorce. I had moved back in with my mom and dad because I had nowhere else to go. I got a telephone call out of the blue from a guy in Dallas, Texas, a recruiter who would not tell me how he tracked me down. And he said, I've got an opportunity with Toshiba. The competencies are the exact opposite of what you are. They're looking for somebody with strong training and some HR. You've got a lot of HR and some training. I'll get you in front of them. I know them very well. Your job is to get them to flip the competencies.
Right.
That happened. I got into training and development, and I have not looked back since. And, it is something truly, Keith, that I am so grateful, and I feel so incredibly blessed because for all of these years, and I hope you believe me because it's true, when I'm standing in front of a group doing my thing, not often because I'm concentrating, I have the conscious thought, I'm getting paid to do this. This is incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. Those of us like that, we can consider ourselves blessed that through our career, I think you would probably join me in saying that work has not felt like work.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's just, it's fun. And I mean, I think, the other thing that makes it so rewarding for me is that truly over the years, I know I have made a difference in people's lives.
Right.
And it doesn't get better than that.
Yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't. I mean, we were talking, you were talking earlier about management and leadership and how to apply it and everything else. I had a participant come up to me one time. I did a 2-day leadership class at Santa Fe of Venice, the big pharma. And we were finished. Guy came up to me, Ron, thank you so much. What a great class, blah, blah, blah. And I knew he was going to say something else, I could tell. And he leaned into me and sort of looked around. We didn't want anyone to overhear. He said, Ron, it was something else too. And I was like, what? And again, I kind of thought I knew what he was going to say. He goes, Ron, it was 2 days of wonderful marriage counseling.
Yeah.
And it spills over.
Yes.
Because, we're leaders in the work world. We're leaders in our personal lives, in our marriages, with our children, with anybody with whom we interact. Yeah. Everybody is a leader on some level.
Yeah. Look, and I also think there's a fine line and maybe no line between personal development, professional development, that any opportunity we have to get curious about ourselves and to get curious about ourselves in terms of how we operate in the relationship with other, that's going to carry over to every context we exist in as a human being.
Keith, oh my goodness. I mean, I just can't reinforce what you're saying more strongly. It's interesting. I've been a New York Giant football fan for many years.
My condolences of late.
I know.
Yeah.
I think we're on the right track. That aside, quite a few years ago, there are 8 core people that go. During a tailgate, Peter comes up to me. He's a chief financial officer for a technology company in Manhattan. He says, hey, Ron, Mr. Leadership Development Man, tell me, what's the one tip the best tip you can give me to make me the best leader possible. And I was like, all right, Peter, you got to let me think about it. I gave it some thought, and I'm being serious now. I went back to him and I was like, Peter, you know what? If you're going to limit me to one tip to be the best leader possible, get to know yourself extraordinarily well.
Right.
The better you know yourself, the more effectively you will work with other people.
Right. Right. And it is fascinating to me to this day. I do believe it's moving in a really good direction, but it is fascinating, at least in my work, Ron. So I'm curious of whether you would agree that is a conversation that is still really challenging for a lot of folks in leadership. That they still want it to be, give me the latest book or the 5 bullet points, just like your friend asked, right? How do I be a great leader? And nowhere on there do they want to, I would say, do your own work.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, it's fascinating to me because, you know, clearly there's no magic bullet.
No.
There's just no magic bullet. In fact, if you don't mind, I'll tell you a quick story that relates to that.
Sure.
An old colleague and friend of mine, Dave Beverly, used to work for AT&T. He was in a meeting many years ago with maybe 200 or 300 people in the audience. And a rocket scientist was giving a presentation. And he was talking about the algorithms and the formulas and everything else. And as he wrapped up, you know, he just said, okay, everybody, the rocket launches in 2 days and we anticipate, you know, complete success. Thank you. Polite applause. David's colleague was coming on next to speak. She goes to the microphone. Okay, everybody. And she was nervous. I'm not going to talk to you about anything as complex or as interesting as what Dr. Keith was just talking about. I'm going to talk to you about coaching and feedback. The rocket scientist came back on the stage. Young lady, I'm so sorry. I forgot to say something. May I have the microphone back just for a moment? He turns to the audience. He goes, people, let's get real clear about something. What I do for a living as a rocket scientist is simple.
Yeah.
There's nothing to it. It's math.
Yeah.
It's formulas.
Yeah.
It's physics. Young lady, what you're about to talk about is much more complex. And he turned back to the audience. Folks, as far as I know, we don't come with formulas.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you.
And I was just like, wow.
It's the best. Look, I have this running joke, although in the moment it doesn't feel like a joke. If you want to piss me off, refer to what you and people like you and I do as the soft sciences, right? Yeah. Where rocket science, math, and engineering, those are the hard sciences. Because what is more complex than each of us alone as a human being? And then we walk into a room and need to do some work together and figure out how to make that happen. And now there's 2 of these complex beings in there. It just doesn't get more complicated than that, and multi-layered and nuanced. And so, yeah. Appreciate him coming back on and sharing that and sharing a little perspective. Right. So let me ask you, my favorite question to always get this podcast started is, because I am a very big believer that those of us in the helping world, it is not a coincidence we are here. So if I knew you when you were a kid, who were you? What were you like? What were you involved in? Maybe what were some of the messages you maybe received in your family of origin that would have been pretty good evidence you were destined to be in the helping world?
As I think back, I was always involved in sports as a kid. Mm-hmm. I loved the team sports. I was always one of the organizers. Always, it's just who's going to call who have we left out? Who still do we need to call?
Right.
Which part of me comes from the very deep caring part of me, is that I care about people. I always have, very, very deeply. I've always tried to, I just remember I always like to help individuals, show individuals how to improve. Again, whether it's in sports, whether it's in schoolwork. I remember, and I have a memory like this in some projects, even in like 2nd, 3rd grade, where the teacher would say, get with a partner and just read what he or she wrote and help them. And I loved doing that. I just loved doing that. And, it's interesting, Keith, because again, you were talking about the reading that I've done. And there's research out there I read in a book. And actually, I'll ask you if you don't mind.
Yeah.
How old do you think we are approximately when our personalities are fully formed? How old?
Well, I think of my two children who, from their first breath, were distinct personalities, at the very least, distinct from each other. So I'm just going to give a very general answer of somewhere very early in life.
That's right. That's exactly right. The research of which I'm aware, and I want to be fair, it comes from an author that I like named Marcus Buckingham.
Okay.
His research indicates our personalities are formed it's done by the time we're 3 or 4 years old. Mm. And then he writes, what I find fascinating is that we don't change much over time at all.
Right.
We become more of who we already are. And as I look back, that's been true for me. I know it's true of my siblings.
Yeah.
As I think of them and I think back to, and I'm the youngest, so I can do this. My memories is like my brother as a kid, he used to love put things together, take things apart and fix things and analyzing. Mechanical engineer. Yeah. That's what he did. My sister comes home one day from school. Mom, I found a bird. It's hurt. And I'm going to build it a little home and I'm going to take care of it. She's a nurse.
Right. There it is. I was just, there's an alternative high school program that I'm connected to that I do some work with some of the kids there. And I was just telling this story because we were talking about inherent strengths and who we are. And this isn't a very large exaggeration, maybe just a little bit, but from kindergarten through 6th grade, so elementary school, four report cards a year. Every single report card for me during that time in my life had a statement on it that said, Keith socializes too much. And I laughed because it was not the education system saying to my mom and dad, we really want to celebrate your son's enhanced interactional skills. Right? They were saying, Keith, sit down and shut up and listen. But sitting around and talking and being with people and being curious about people, that has been me from my first breath. And as you know, you are illustrating, it is not a surprise that I do what I do. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, my wife was a 5th grade teacher for 30 years. And every year she taught the same lesson, which I think this is beyond brilliant, frankly. And she's brilliant, frankly, too, with that said. She used to teach the lesson every year. It is not how smart are you. It is about how are you smart. Mm. And I was just like, Lori, that is so great. I'm writing that down. That is just tell Lori wonderful. I'm stealing that. Could you say that again? Sure. It's not how smart are you. It's how are you smart? Because we are all smart in different ways and we all contribute differently. All right. Say it one more time, Ron. Sure. It's not how smart are you. Yeah. It's how are you smart? How are you smart? Love that. Right, because then we all get to celebrate our particular brand of smart. Exactly. Right. Exactly. You know, I mean, I think back and the labels that were attached, and again, for whatever reason for me, particularly in high school, oh, those are the nerds. Yeah. No, they're the ones who are strong technically, and we need them. Right. You know, they're the jocks, or they're the ladies' men, or whatever. And it's like, no, those are the people who know how to socialize well already at that age. Yeah. No question. So start to fill us in a little bit on the work you do, and as you know, I'm really interested in the how. So what are some of the models, modalities, ways of thinking that you bring to your particular brand of the helping conversation?
Well, I mean, first of all, I really appreciate the how, because it drives me crazy when I read something or I hear something. It's like, this is what you need to do when the how is not involved.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, I'll go back to getting to know yourself and working well with others. There's a quote that I like that comes from Daniel Goleman in Emotional Intelligence. And he writes simply, empathy represents the most important social skill to have at work. And I do believe that. And empathy, I don't want to get into the whole thing here. I could go on and on and on. My point simply is, I used to think empathy was put yourself in the other person's shoes and feel what they feel. And that's not true. There's much more to it. This comes from Daniel Goleman and some others too. Empathy is about understanding others. Empathy is about caring, and empathy is about taking the appropriate action. Understanding others. If I don't understand somebody, if I don't understand a situation or someone's perspective, the best way of which I'm aware the how piece in order to understand is to ask questions.
Right.
And just some quick sample questions that are so simple. Keith, what's your concern about this?
Yeah.
What's your concern about the budget? What's your concern about working with Ron as a colleague? What's the situation, Keith? Just as another question. What am I missing, Keith? Just sample questions. That's the how for me.
Right.
And the one thing that I love, and this is one of the reasons I love to read so much, is my wife and I were flying home from San Francisco one day. I was reading a book, and it tied into empathy. And the author said simply, you've asked enough questions and you understand somebody when you can tell their story. When you can tell their side, you get it.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a quick example if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
In the icebreakers I do in my sessions, I like to have people just talk to each other. Stand up, talk to each other, and I give them a template of things to talk about. It breaks the ice well. In my background, I've run a number of marathons. And I was talking to a participant in Philadelphia one day, and we got to talking about running. And she said, "Oh, I could never run a marathon." And I made a mistake because I didn't understand her. And rather than asking her questions, I tried to convince her. Yes, you could.
Yeah, right.
It's very difficult.
Right.
It's a lot of training. It's unbelievable when you finish. Long story short, she got angry with me after a while. Not angry, just whatever. And finally, her point to me was, "Ron, you don't get it.
Yeah.
I'd love to run a marathon. I talked to my doctor. I have very bad knees. I would hurt myself permanently. All I needed to do, Keith, what's your concern about running a marathon?"
Right.
Oh, now I get it.
Yeah.
Boom. I know the story.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
Yeah. Yeah. What just popped in my head as you were talking about, what's your concern is in the world, in the modality of conversational intelligence. Judith Glaser always talked about ask questions for which you have no answers. Because you and I both know that people can ask questions and they can still be leading questions, trying to move you towards how I see things. Versus truly asking questions for which you have no answer because I want you to teach me about your story.
Yeah. I'm asking to understand.
Yeah.
Understand others. Absolutely. Yes. And then what's interesting, or for me, once you understand, then you go down to caring. And what I like to do in my sessions, we brainstorm a list of things people care about at work.
Right. Just
brainstorm everything you care about. And, we come up with, I care about people. I care about quality. I care about safety. I care about, profits. I care, and the question simply is, can you satisfy everybody, everything at all times? And people are like, no, you can't. And I was like, that's right.
Yeah.
And part of empathy And part of caring means you need to have difficult conversations with people sometimes, and conversations that are not going to be particularly pleasant. And that's okay, because if you don't, you're not going to be as effective as possible. Right. And good leaders have those difficult conversations. Good leaders know how to have those difficult conversations.
But then there's another skill I just want to get your thoughts on, because at that moment, if we're now in the head and heart of that leader, then that's the moment where one of the most, at least to me, most profound skills that a leader needs to have are really clear boundaries, that they know where they end and someone else begins. So if we have a difficult conversation and that person in front of me becomes upset, brings upsetness into the room, I'm compassionate, I'm empathic, I do all of those things, but I also don't necessarily change because now I'm really uncomfortable with somebody else's discomfort.
Right.
That's a pretty high level intra-personal skill.
That's right. That's exactly right. And that also ties into more of, at least for me, emotional intelligence.
Yes. Yeah.
And one of the things I like to talk about with people too is just that, Keith. If the conversation becomes confrontational,
right? If
the conversation becomes emotional, what are some options? Maybe you need to just very simply, you know what, Keith? We're both starting to get a little upset. We're both getting a little angry here. You want to reconvene in a couple hours?
Yeah. Yeah.
And just those sorts of things. Or, I mean, even if, Keith, assume we're talking as colleagues just about an issue, a problem with a project, something, and we're going nowhere. What can we do? Instead of sitting there banging our heads against the wall, maybe we can involve some other people.
Right.
Who else do we know? We, not I, not you. Who do we know that we can get involved here? Who can help us?
Yeah.
And, at some point in time too, uncomfortable. And again, I'll speak for myself. I don't like doing this, except sometimes it's necessary. Maybe we need to escalate this, Keith. Maybe we need to take this to the next level.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. You don't know what to do. Let's take it upstairs.
Right. And so I want to jump into this a little bit more specifically, because you're describing a situation. So one, for us to even have the conversation. Two, for us to give each other permission for the conversation to become filled with emotion, potentially conflictual. For us to each admit to each other that maybe we don't have the answer right now in the room and we need, as you just said, to maybe bring somebody else in. All of that, Ron, I'm sure you would agree, requires a pretty significant level of trust and safety in the room for us to even go there together. So, this is kind of a really big area for me, something that fascinates me. So
sure.
In your work with folks, whether it's in your training or in your coaching, what are some of the things that you think about that allow you to very quickly attend to the creation of trust and safety and inclusion in your work with other human beings?
Keith, you're mentioning the things that are all a part of, at least for me, of psychological safety.
Right.
Psychological safety, and again, at least the way I understand it, the four different dimensions. Number one comes from inclusion. People want to feel included. In the workplace, in my training sessions, I want people to be comfortable with each other. I want people to almost quote unquote know each other. And that's one of the reasons I do that opening activity. Talk to each other about your passions. Talk to each other about challenges you have in the workplace. And I ask them when we're finished, how is this activity going to help us work together over the next 2 days or whatever it is? Like, wow, people have the same challenges I do. I feel safe. And that's a quote from people. I feel safe.
Yeah.
I feel like I know people now. Wonderful. Then the second level is learning. I feel comfortable learning. I feel comfortable asking questions. Because I don't know everything, and it's okay. I don't feel stupid. I don't feel like I'm going to get attacked. Or, oh, how could you ask such a dumb question?
Right.
And again, it's all part of the atmosphere itself that the leader sets, or that, and that in my case here, just what we're talking about, that the facilitator sets. And then thirdly, people want to contribute. People want to be able to contribute on the team. People want to be able to contribute in the class itself and just say, oh, Ron, I have a thought on that, if I ask a question or whatever. And more importantly, Keith, I don't want to make this about me. Just in the workplace itself, people want to be able to contribute and just help the cause, as it were. And without being, without somebody looking over their shoulder, which again is what a manager might do.
Right.
Say, oh, Keith, let me just see how's that going over there.
Yeah.
And a good leader is, Keith, do it. You have the competencies, you have the knowledge, the experience, and the skill. You don't need me, and I have better things to do than to watch you.
Right.
Lastly. And this is a real key, because this is what we're talking about. We're talking about with our scenario before. The final level is challenge. People need to feel comfortable and feel safe in challenging each other, challenging the status quo. And I'll tell you, it was so interesting yesterday. I mean, I was in Washington, D.C. doing an American management course. And in the afternoon, I asked a question. We were talking about feedback and some other things. And I made a comment about, you might want to do this every 2 weeks, folks, based on a model we were talking about.
Right.
One of the participants, Amber, I knew she wanted to say something. You could see that she was ready. And again, you could just tell she was like, should I say this? Should I say this? And she was like, Ron, you know what? I'm sorry. I have a completely different perspective on that. And I was like, good. What is it? Good. What is it? And that's psychological safety,
right?
Where it's just like, I'm going to tell the facilitator, no, I'm not on board with this. And then the key is the facilitator, or again, in the workplace, the leader needs to be receptive to that. Where it's like, what do you mean you don't agree with that? Say,
right.
Okay, what's your perspective?
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to actually what we can link it back to empathy. Let me understand you.
Yeah. So talk a little bit more about that, back to my opening remarks from that article. And not that I want to ask you the exact same question that your friend asked you while you were tailgating, but when you think about your work with leaders, teaching leadership, what are some of the primary concepts, maybe above and beyond empathy, you've already highlighted, which is such a needed skill in our world, period. What are some of the concepts that bump around in your head as you think about doing that kind of work and preparing next generation to be leaders, especially in the workplace?
I think one of the biggest things, truly, is something you and I were talking about a little bit before the show, is leaders need to set the vision.
Yeah.
Leaders need to set the direction. This is where we're going. This is where we're going to go. And then they guide. They guide the ship. And I think that's such a key thing.
Right.
In that, and when I say guide the ship, this is the direction in which we're going. Let me check in with you in 2 weeks and just see how things are going. And not being on top of people. I mean, there's a book that I read about this. It's called Leadership as Language. It's written by a guy named David Marquet. And I just absolutely love it. And I mean, one of the biggest things he talks about in there is how critical preparation is. He talks about, okay, let's set the direction. This is where we're going to go. Let's prepare and prepare. And he calls that blue work. And then once you start the project, he calls that red work. And his point simply is once we begin this project, I'm not going to interrupt you. I'm not going to get in your way at all.
Right.
Until we have reached the actual point where we have decided as a team, we will stop. And again, just for argument's sake here, on July 10th, we are going to stop everything. And we're just going to talk about how things are going.
Right.
What's going well? Where are we struggling? What do we need to adjust? And his point is, let the doers do.
Yeah.
Stay away from them.
Right.
Because again, that's the psychological safety. I trust you, you can contribute. And then when we sit down and talk about how things are going, absolutely challenge the process. It's okay.
Yeah.
That's what this is about.
It's really,
I think,
it's really treating people as their own best resource.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Exactly. And trusting that, again, let's go back to what we were saying before. It's not how smart are you, it's how are you smart. Keith, you know more about this than I do. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I'm with you.
I'm not going to sit there as the leader. Well, Keith, this is my idea. What do you think? It's like,
right.
No, I'm going to reverse it. You know more. Where do you think we should go with this?
But here's the challenge, I think, so I think this is a place where sometimes this is one of those places where we really need those of us who do some of the kind of work that you and I do. We need to really come in, really deeply listening to the leaders, because I find still in many workplaces, the message above the leaders to the leader is you need to be in control of everything. They're getting that message very loud and clear from the hierarchy above them. And so when dudes like you and I walk in and say, no, they look at us like we're crazy because, hey, consultant dude or coach dude, you're not hearing the message I'm getting, which is I'm being told I am supposed to be in total control of all 15 people on my team.
Right.
And so, I find that just such an interesting dilemma in our work and in systems when the top of the system comes to people like you and I and says, hey, we'd love to hire you to come in and do this work with folks. By the way, I won't be in the room.
Right. Exactly. I won't be there. And Keith, it has been my direct experience on numerous occasions with the American Management Association. Obviously, when I do what's called a public class, where there are people from different companies in the room.
Yeah.
So many, I was just doing an building effective work relationships class. I also facilitate a class, how to communicate with tact and diplomacy. A lot of people get, quote unquote, sent to these classes. You need to build relationships. You need to learn how to be tactful.
Right.
So many people say to me, Ron, I'll tell you what, I'm glad to be here. It's okay. My boss is the one that really needs to be here.
Yeah.
And again, not 100%, because that's just not true. Still in all, 85% of the time, my instincts tell me the individual's right.
Yeah. Oh,
it's
yeah.
Probably your boss. I don't think you need to be. You can use the class, absolutely.
Right.
Probably better if your boss were here.
Right. Or at the very least, if that person's invite to come to the class was you're going, boy, is that an insight into the dynamic of that system, that
Exactly.
They were not engaged in a conversation about their growth, their development. Hey, what do you think? You're just told, okay, you're going to this class Ron is doing.
Well, interestingly, I'll ask you another question here. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Go ahead. That's fine.
In a training session overall, and I know there are different aspects to it. I understand that.
Right.
Just in general terms, though, when there's going to be a training event, who do you think is the most important person involved? Is it the participant himself or herself? Is it the facilitator? Or is it the participant's manager?
My bias, well, all of them have importance, but my bias would be I always think systemically. And so I think if it can't just be the one leader in the room that got sent, because that leader's going back to work in a system. And so if the person above them more represents the larger system, the dynamics of the system, the assumptions of the system, the culture of the system, then I would say the higher up the hierarchy chain you can go, the more important it is to get that person in the room.
That's yeah, and actually, what I mean too is, let me explain. You're right, absolutely, or at least that's my perspective. When someone goes to a training session, the most important person is that person's manager.
Yeah,
because the best way this can work before the event itself. I actually, let's use you and I as an example. Okay, if you're my manager. Okay, Ron, I want you to go to this particular class. Okay, fine. Let's talk through, both of us, what the objectives are
right.
that I'd like you, that Ron, I'd like you to come out of here with.
Right.
Okay, yeah, Keith, that makes sense to me. Or even if I don't agree with you, still and all, this is what I'd like you to come out of with, Ron. All right, fine. When I get back to work, what needs to happen, you and I need to sit down again. Ron, what did you get out of the course?
Right.
Okay, wonderful. What should I, Keith, be looking for from you moving forward?
Right.
Because as the facilitator, I'm gone.
Yeah.
I'm not there.
Yeah.
It's you, the manager,
Yeah.
that needs to reinforce now.
Yeah. I just had that, that kind of wonderful experience. There's a really cool 26-year-old young man that I was asked to do some coaching with in a company that I do some executive coaching for. And we had that first meeting with his supervisor to put our heads together and figure out, all right, if this kid and I are going to do this work, where are we going with the work? Right. And it was just, the cool thing about those conversations is it was an opportunity for the 26-year-old kid to hear from his supervisor, who I know he looks up to and is a much more seasoned person within the company, for that kid to hear his strengths, for that kid to hear the vision his supervisor has for him, the excitement the supervisor has for seeing, especially at a pretty young age, this kid already moving into a leadership position. He's heading up a team of 5 folks. We would have missed all of that if I had just said, okay, all right, kid, you and I will make an appointment. We'll get moving.
And we'll take care of it.
Right.
It won't work.
Yeah.
I mean, it just will not work. And I mean, it's sad because I had almost the opposite experience. I was going to work with a telecommunications firm, a small firm, and I met with the HR person. Okay. And I've known Michelle a long time. We're like, oh yeah, this will work. I met with the COO and I was like, Joe, whatever his name was, I don't remember. I was like, one of the most important things we need to do, Joe, is post-course reinforce this. And there are different ways we can do it and so forth.
Right.
We don't have time for that.
Right.
We don't have time for that. And I was like, all right, you're going to bring me in and you're going to pay me all this money. And I'll tell you right now, you're throwing it away.
Yeah.
It's up to you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll come in and do it.
Yeah.
It's your decision. It's your decision as the leader. If you want to do the right thing, this is the right thing to do.
Right. Look, I've been in those a couple of years ago. I was in the exact same conversation, a company here in town of about 30 employees, and they wanted me. It's a very customer service oriented business, and they were really struggling with their customer service. And they asked me to come in and do like one of these, hour to 2 hour presentations that somehow was going to sprinkle magic dust on the place or something. I don't know, something like that, right? And I said, I can't do it. I can't do it. Like, so here's what I could do. Here's a more comprehensive kind of way I could come at it, because I really have no belief whatsoever. And I'm pretty confident in what I do, but I have no belief whatsoever that me talking to your staff for, an hour and a half is going to make any difference when we're talking about, again, the complexity of the kind of skill set you're looking to enhance in your folks.
That's right.
And, they didn't hire me, and that was fine because it was there was a time I might have done it, and then come on. Well, let's be real and honor the complexity of what you're asking your people to do.
Well, and you know what though, Keith? I'm going to go back to what you were talking about in the introduction when you were reading the article.
Yeah.
It made me think of something, and I don't know to whom to contribute the quote. I've heard this a number of different times, though. The difference between leaders and managers. Managers do things right. Leaders do the right things.
Mm.
And
I like that.
and again, what I'm thinking about is you did the right thing. And again, my opinion, just the right thing. What's the right thing to do here? No deal. I'm not going to come in because I have integrity and I just don't believe I'm going to make a difference, and I don't want to do that.
I like that. That's an awesome quote. Yeah. That's a great way to, not to simplify it, but to, somewhat sum up some of the differences between managing somebody, if that's even possible, and being a leader. So let me ask you this, Ron, because I'm a big believer that the best leaders, in addition to everything we've talked about around self-awareness and setting the vision, that the best leaders are strength-based. They see the best in the people that they work with. They highlight strength. So yep. I'm a very big believer that to be able to do that well in a leadership role, you need to be able to do it for yourself. So I always give my guests a couple of minutes to brag about yourself. What are some of Ron Reich's greatest strengths, positive attributes, positive characteristics, talents, skills that he brings to the world?
Mm-hmm. I am a very good facilitator. I am a very good resource to people based on the reading that I've done.
Yeah.
And I'm also a good problem solver.
Right.
And the reason I say that is simply, I know myself well.
Yeah.
And I one of the ways I've gotten to know myself well is through personality assessments.
Mm-hmm.
And again, for me personally, Keith, I am a big believer in the DISC instrument.
Okay.
I love it.
Yeah.
And again, my point simply is it helped me all those years ago to understand that, you know what, I'm analytical, I'm linear. I like people a lot. I also know that my preference is to work with smaller groups,
right? Not
real big groups. I can and I will. My preference, though, is one-on-one, two-on-one, and I mean I can I'm completely comfortable facilitating for any size group. If we're going to be getting real deep into things, my preference is smaller. Okay. And again, I'm making this longer than I meant to. My point simply is, though, I realize I'm a good problem solver based on the DISC, where it's like, yeah, I am good at looking at facts, analyzing data, and coming up with solutions. And the reading that I do helps me to solve these problems.
Right.
And I need to add, this is important for me, really important. I believe so strongly, and I do it in every session that I facilitate when we're talking about emotional intelligence.
Right. I
have the people say out loud, what are your strengths?
Awesome.
What are your strengths?
Yeah.
Tell me out loud. Not tell me. Tell us out loud.
Yeah.
And I ask them too, though, when is it appropriate and necessary to share these strengths with people at work?
Right.
And sometimes people are like, wow, yeah, that's bragging. How is that bragging? How is that bragging? How are we smart?
Right.
We all have strengths. You need to tell people.
Yeah.
And on the other side of that, we all have limitations too.
Yeah.
Good leaders know their limitations,
right,
and they share them. And I'm completely comfortable with that. And I'll tell you right now, a couple of my limitations. I'm not strong technically.
Yeah.
I never have been. I never will be. If something goes wrong technically when I'm doing a session, folks, I need help.
Yeah, right.
I'm sorry. I'm a little embarrassed. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I'm not the best writer in the world.
Right.
I struggle with that.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Other people are good at writing. Here, would you do this? Or would you mind editing what I wrote?
It continues to be such a fascinating narrative to me. That voice that people hear, that you just said it, when they're asked to share their strengths. I don't want to be full of myself. I don't want to be boastful. I don't want to let my light shine too much. It is such a fascinating narrative that somewhere gets into our head. I was sharing this with someone the other day because I do a similar kind of exercise with the people I work with around identifying their strengths. And I've been recently telling this story because it is a new story in my life. I have a 2.5-year-old grandson who I am blessed that I get to hang out with, several days a week. And I found I've become fascinated. His name is Remy. And the fascination I have with Remy is every way he interacts with me and his grandma and his world right now at 2.5 is Remy basically saying, hey world, I'm the shit. I'm the best. And I revel in it with him, but I found myself so curious. Where do we lose that? And that could be a whole nother podcast, the answer to that.
Yeah.
But right, because clearly we lose it somewhere, that we end up in adulthood and you ask someone to just humbly say, here's what I think some of my strengths are. How am I smart? And they freak out and I don't want to be that. It is just such a fascinating and it's just a fascinating narrative that I'm always curious about.
Yeah. And, I think the important part too is good leaders are humble.
Yes, exactly.
And, when I say, share your strengths, or when I share my strengths, my hope is that comes across confidently and humbly, hey, everybody.
Yeah. Right.
By the way, I've read 300.
Yeah,
I'll say, hey, I'm a good resource, guys. I'm a good resource, and I'll be glad to help you. And I will.
Yeah. Yeah. Or I just always think, we all have days that suck, right? We all sometimes wake up and have days that suck. And on those days, if I don't know what's in my toolkit, if I don't know what I can call upon from within me that could help me get through that day, then I'm stuck. I've got a dilemma on my hands. And so I'm with you on that this isn't about being boastful or full of yourself or I'm better than. It's a level of, maybe some people call it quiet confidence. I don't know, that I just, at this point in my life, I know what I can call upon. I know what works for me. I know I'm going to keep going back to this quote because I love it. I know how I'm smart and what works for me.
Well, and I'll tell you what's interesting is quite a few years ago, a company where I was working, my boss was beating me up. And I was my confidence was going down.
Right.
And I still remember, I said earlier, I'm a big Giant fan.
Yeah.
We had a Monday night game. And I decided to take Tuesday off because I knew I was going to be up really late watching the game. And I decided to take Tuesday off. I woke up Tuesday and I was just like, I'm not happy here. And, I'm getting beaten up every day. And what I decided to do was sit down and write out all of my accomplishments that I could think of at that company. And when I was done, I was just smiling. I was like, you know what? The problem is not me.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not the cat's meow.
Yeah, right. I hear you.
And that's not what I'm saying.
I hear you.
There was some validity to what Joe was talking about.
Right.
Some,
right.
Not all of it.
Right. Because I think our tendency as human beings is we go so to the negative when we get that kind of feedback, that we just deride ourselves and I'm this and I'm this and none of it is very good. And it's just that's the magic and the importance in our work of being strength-based, and for a leader to have that skill.
Well, and you know what? I'll give you another example of that. In that we go to the negative. One of my clients is a small law firm in New Jersey. And one of the attorneys is probably, I'm not sure, she might be 28, 29, something like that. And the managing director has said to me, and she has herself too,
right.
I don't have a lot of confidence. And so I told her, I said, I want you to go to the managing director at the end of every week, and you need to tell her 5 things you did well this week.
Yeah.
And she was like, I don't want to do that. I can't do that. I said, yeah, you can. And you're going to do it because she already agreed. She's going to follow up with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and it's just true though, because again, how are you smart?
Right.
It's there. Just acknowledge it. Yeah. It's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, the other piece that I think about is, around helping people identify what their strengths are. Other than aspects of self, like you said, you're not very technical and things like that. I have become a believer that most of the ways of being that trip us up, right, that we might say are not on our strength list, are actually just the other side of the coin of a strength. So let's use empathy, right? I consider myself a very empathic person. It's a strength. It's something I'm very proud of. I use it every day. Right. Sometimes it doesn't work for me, that I can take on other people's feelings a little bit too much, right? So, so I think again, if we give ourselves permission to look at our strengths, it also sometimes allows us to relook at the aspects of us that we have always felt were kind of deficit based or weakness. That let's not even call them that. It's just the other side of the coin.
Right. Well, and you know, what you're making me think of here, Keith, is also that any of my limitations are never going to become strengths.
Right.
It's not going to happen. And I think that's one of the other mistakes leaders make and organizations as a whole make, where it's like, okay, Ron, you don't write well, we're going to make you a good writer.
Right, exactly.
It's like, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you're taking time away to try to get me from being a below average writer to maybe halfway decent. It's never going to become a strength. Yeah. Let someone else do it.
Look, and this is true because when I take the DISC or any other kinds of assessments like that, you know, whatever the tools measure of being kind of task oriented, it is so not me. And I laugh because, you know, at the end of the month, I have to write up, you know, some invoices to send out to get paid for some of my work. Ron, I cannot tell you how painful it is to get my tush into the chair, to sit down and write them, because I hate writing so much. You know, and here's like, if I don't write them, I don't get paid, but I feel it. I feel the push pull at the end of it. Oh, Keith, will you just sit down and do it? So I'm with you. Like, that's never going to be a strength. That's not back to our conversation of who we inherently are. It sounds like you and I, that is not inherently us.
Right.
Yeah. So listen, I'm looking at the time. We're running out of time here. So a couple of things I wanted to ask really quick. As someone who is a voracious reader, and I so admire that quality. Any author or authors that you would highly recommend to folks who are, you know, really want to do some reading on concepts around leadership, emotional intelligence, psychological safety?
For psychological safety, the book that I read is called The 4 Dimensions of Psychological Safety.
Okay.
And I'm on the road right now, and I don't have the book in front of me. I think it's written by Tim Clark.
Okay.
I want to make sure I give credit.
Okay.
I think that's the author. It's The 4 Dimensions of Psychological Safety.
Okay.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Another good book that I would recommend is and one of my favorite authors is Patrick Lencioni.
Okay.
Do you know Patrick's work at all?
I know about the work. I have not read any of his stuff.
Yeah. I've read many of his books. And any of them are good. The one book I would recommend to leaders, if you want to do any organizational development work relative to developing a mission or a vision and things like that, the book is called The Advantage, and it is excellent. It is just excellent. I use that as a template when I'm doing that kind of work with clients. I ask them to read the book. What else? I think probably one of the best quote unquote, and again, I mean this in context, just general management books, talking about how to delegate, how to coach and support and things like that. It's called Leading at a Higher Level.
Okay.
And that's written by Ken Blanchard.
Yeah. Ooh,
you know, from Situational Leadership. Yeah. And he takes you through the entire situational leadership model. It's an excellent book.
Awesome.
Just excellent.
Awesome. I'm gonna reach out to you sometime relatively soon, Ron, because I'm about to propose to a company that I've been doing some work with, doing a monthly book read with emerging leaders. And so I think I'm going to reach out to you and just get maybe your top 10, you know, that you might recommend.
On that note, Keith, I would love to talk to you about that.
Okay.
I have an emerging leaders program.
Awesome. Let's chat.
Yeah. Let's talk
chat.
about that. I'd love to.
That would be great. That would be great. Ron Reich, thank you so much for making the time to be here and to be in this conversation, wonderful conversation about leadership and what you bring. And
again, I hope you believe me because it's true. I really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Oh, it was great. It was great. Now, I will also tell you, you'll appreciate this because I did grow up down in the New York metropolitan area, so I grew up a Giant fan, although I'm now a converted Buffalo Bills fan up here in Western New York. But I was in the stadium, Ron, for the fumble in the Meadowlands. So you need to be a longtime Giant fan to get that relate, but
I was a freshman in college.
Yeah.
And my equivalent to being in the stadium for the fumble was when I don't even remember which Philadelphia Eagle it was, returned the punt. How many years ago? We were up like 31-10 at halftime. And the game was essentially for the division and we lost on the last play. I was like, all right. I had never heard the stadium that quiet, and everybody just shuffled out. It was like,
I experienced the same thing when Herman Edwards picked up that Joe Pisarcik fumble, and yes, a wave of white went into the end zone. Yes, painful New York Giant
memories. Good to laugh about it now.
Well, listen, thank you again so much for being here and sharing your thoughts and your knowledge and your skill.
My pleasure, Keith.
And we'll stay in touch. Good,
I like that.
All right.
Bye.
All right, folks. So thank you so much for being with us today and sitting in with us and being a part of this conversation. I hope you found it as helpful and as insightful as I did. Such important work that folks like Ron are out there doing today to equip organizations and systems and next generation leadership with the skills that they need to do this work and to do it well. So I hope you're able to join us again for the next episode as we continue to shine a light on the skill and talent of those individuals that invite another into that compassionate, complex, and intimate space called the helping conversation. Have a great day, everyone.
We thank you for sitting in on our discussion today on just one unique version of the helping conversation. We would love to hear your thoughts on today's podcast, so we sincerely invite you to follow, rate, and most importantly, review our episodes. For more information on Keith Greer and this podcast, log on to keithgreercoaching.com. Please join us for our next episode as we continue the exploration and celebration of the practice, art, and science of the helping conversation.